Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. So today's video, we are going to be exploring the significance of Chiron conjunct the North Node. The exact conjunction has now happened, and this is happening in Aries. So for those of you that have been following this series that I've been creating, I've been talking about the significance of the planetary stellium that is happening in Aquarius. I've been touching on the importance of Mars and Venus's Pluto conjunction. And I've also been then pointing towards practical ways that you can calibrate yourself and orientate yourself towards this new phase Mars-Venus conjunction that's going to be happening in the next couple of days. So as you probably have guessed, there's kind of a momentum that we're building up here, okay? So now we're going to be focusing on more of the metaphysics of the current astrological transits that we're experiencing. So what I mean when I say metaphysics, I'm referring to the dimension of reality where things become a little bit more abstract. When we're talking about Chiron and we are talking about the North Node, these are points and references in space that require a more subtle state of awareness in order for you to experience them or feel or sense them, especially when it comes to interpreting Chiron and experiencing Chiron in your consciousness. So another way for me to help orientate us and you to localizing your sense of understanding that Chiron North Node is currently presenting to us in our field of vision at this moment is that if the planets that have been, and the aspects that I've been talking about now, Mars, Venus, Pluto, etc., planetary systems in Aquarius, these are cycles and planetary events that are sort of present with us. They're very local with us. Okay, it's something that these cycles are existing in a small frame, whereas we're broadening our perspective and we're moving more into outer space. We're moving more deeper into our solar system, and we're needing to enhance our ESP, extrasensory perception, and tune into more mythic sensory perception states of consciousness, right? This level that is beyond the more physical planetary patterns that exist in our realm. So again, Mars would be like, I will. Venus is, I relate, right? These are fundamental things that we do on a daily basis. Okay. So these more abstract, nonlinear cycles that are beyond Mars and Venus aspects is the next layering of integration. Okay, so I hope that that's kind of like clear. You're starting to get a sense of what I'm referring to here, that we're moving out of space or down our solar system and we're all broadening it, and that these things that I've been talking about right now integrate into the wider orbs of cycles like Chiron and the nodal axis. Okay. All right, so abstract. So in order for me to ground this conversation today, I'm going to start off with some concepts that hopefully will connect us to the symbology of Chiron, the experience of it, the nodes, and then the importance and significance of associating Chiron with Uranus and Saturn. These two planets, these Chiron and Saturn and Uranus planets, are very important to pay attention to. Okay. So Chiron as a planetary symbol equals sensation. Okay. It is a sensation, a sensitivity that exists within our psychic awareness. So this asteroid, okay, can be translated in our human experience as a sensitivity, right? A peak spike in awareness of something, right? And a sensation that we experience within the body. And then if we go deeper into it, it often manifests itself as sort of like certain health problems within the body that draws our attention to a deeper wound that exists beyond the physical, but is interplaying with the physical. Okay. So we're starting to broaden our scope of understanding here with Chiron as we embrace this idea that there is a reality that is existing in an invisible world, like Plato would talk about, and that it is interconnected with the physical world, but you can't see it in the same way that you can see the physical world. And yet they are two parts, one part of another part that when put together, you can see the manifestation of it. Okay. So we're becoming a little bit lucid here in this sense. So I want you to remember a time where you injured yourself, and particularly where you may have cut your skin, right? Let's say, for instance, you're going about your day and you knock your skin somewhere, your hand, your arm, your leg, whatever, and you get a graze. Okay. So remember that moment, just whenever that occurred, right? Paper cut as an example. Now, what I want you to then further explore is how you associated that injury within your perception and then within your consciousness, so within your way of relating to it. Most of us will notice that, you know, that injury is like, this is sore. I can see that something has nicked me, and I need to address that. Right, I need to address that. Some of us will be like, it's going to be fine. Others will need to say, I need to address this. Okay. Now, let's say 2 days later, somebody comes to you and they're kind of having a conversation, and let's say they want to put their hand on your arm, for instance, or in this case, like on your arm, and they sort of come closer to the wound. And as they come closer to the wound, you notice that you have this reaction towards somebody sort of coming closer to the wound because you know that that's a sensitive area, right? You've recently been injured there. And so there's a kind of withdrawal, a kickback, and also a kind of rejection of wanting to recreate that pain and that sensation. So Chiron is best understood and illustrated through that somatic sensation and sensitivity towards something that has been hurt in me that I don't want to reactivate, but I'm sensitive to, and so I'm very hyper conscious of that place. Okay. So now what I want you to do is imagine where Chiron sits in your chart. Okay. And now what I want you to sort of wrap around that Chiron is in your psyche, in your emotional field, there is that sensitivity, the location of Chiron, and it's pointing to that and saying, here's where you've been injured. Here's where something's happened. And you're sensitive to this because there's an opening there. There's a vulnerability there. There's a kind of nick, right? There's a cut of some sort. Wound, if you can say. So we're sensitive to that. And we naturally, when anything comes close to that space, we will naturally have a knee-jerk reaction, like, don't come close to this, or I want to reject anything or push it away, or so that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. So does that make sense? Right? Within your psyche, there's a sensitive space, and you know that anything that comes close to that is going to cause you to have that response. Okay. So the nodes, the south node and the north node, are these states of awareness where one state is familiarity, security, something that feels known and predictable. Okay. So for most of you, if I ask you to recall the memory of a childhood friend or an experience or where you grew up, you'll notice that certain images will come to the forefront of your consciousness, and you'll kind of remember certain experiences, good or bad. Either way, you have accessed the south node in our consciousness. This abstract point in space is a reference point or a gravity point that draws us back to something that has already occurred and that is familiar in the sense that it is part of your memory field. Okay. The north node, for most of us, would be the opposite of that. It would be a landscape that feels undeveloped, not explored, but has a tremendous curiosity to it, right? I was like, well, I wonder what that is. I seek to experience more and develop more memory in that area, while the south node says familiarity, predictability, but I kind of feel like I need to go beyond those definitions. Does that make sense? Okay. So you can start to imagine that Chiron in the north node is this interesting paradox of, for us to move into a landscape that feels uncharted, underdeveloped, doesn't have any form to it, there isn't familiarity, it's not predictable, and so therefore, right? And yet at the same time, the natural need to explore that as a way to grow beyond definitions and boundaries, right? Limitations, thresholds. And yet there's this wound that sits there saying, oh, hold on, you mean to tell me I have to not only go into this environment that feels sort of unestablished, and there's a sensitivity there that in a natural way I would want to avoid because of the wound that's there? And the answer is yes. We have to do that. Let that sink in for a moment. Okay, that's what this is about. This Chiron conjunct the North Node is a signature that is pointing towards all these planets that I've been talking about and saying, you have to fill that in here. You have to anchor that in here. We have to go in this direction. It doesn't feel natural to move into that space, and yet we have to show up there. We have to come into that space. Right? That's where we're going to grow. That's where we're going to establish new territory. Where we're going to recalibrate ourselves in a way that is different from these pre-existing definitions. So this is an interesting little paradox that we've got here, again, in terms of familiarity and new charted territory, and then familiarity that feels outdated, that is no longer working for us, and is actually causing suffering. And yet on this other side, there's a need to move through sensitivity in order to liberate ourselves from the suffering, right? So wherever that wherever that North Node Chiron is landing in your astrology chart, that's the place that your emotional and psychological growth is going to occur for you. And we're going to have to go through that sensitivity. We're going to have to go through that wounding to come to the other side of something. Okay. So now that I've talked about these two spaces and you've kind of sort of grasped to a certain degree the thing I'm talking about here, I want to now address why, in order to understand Chiron, you must have a firm understanding of Uranus and Saturn, not only in your personal astrology chart, but also this Chiron has to be understood in the context of these two planetary systems. Now, there is a live stream I did on Chiron, I think like 4 years ago or something. It's on my YouTube channel. I'll post it in the description for you to watch. And that's kind of 2 hours of talking about Chiron at depth. Okay, so if you want to go more into these things. Chiron's orbit exists between Saturn and Uranus. Saturn is the principle or evolutionary pattern in consciousness and reality that says, here's the thing that we can say exists for certain. Like this desk that is currently in front of me right now, I can touch it, I can use my senses, I can establish a sort of connection to it and say, yep, my eyes see this, I can make a sound with it, my hands feel it, and so in a sensory perception way, we can say, here it is, it's defined. Everybody can point to it and say, yes, that is a desk. Just as we can all point to an airplane and say, yes, that's an airplane. So Saturn is the world of forms and the structural definition of things and the way that we then interrelate with these forms and definitions. So we have laws, and then we have a relationship to the laws and the boundaries that they present to us and hold for us, and the purpose that those boundaries hold for us, right? Or against us. So in the world of Saturn, this is the thing that I can say, yes, I can see that and I know that that's there, right? The other side of this place is Uranus, which is beyond that state, as I was referring to earlier, talking about earlier. It is beyond that state and yet interconnected into that state. The example of wind is a way that we can grasp Uranian states of consciousness. There are many different other versions of it, but this is one what I think would help us a lot is we know that wind exists because when we feel the sensation of moving air on our skin, we can say, aha, there's something here that's invisible to the eye. But when we notice it moving against our skin, we can say, yes, there's something here. We notice that wind exists because the palm trees and the leaves, etc., or flagpoles or the sails of a yacht, they show us that wind exists because wind almost in a sense interacts with the form and awakens us to the invisible world through the interaction with the form. Okay? If it was a clear sky, there was no object in sight that shows us that wind exists, and wind was blowing, it would be more difficult for us to point to it and say with absolute certainty, yes, there's wind, because in a sense, the kind of moving air has this invisibility to it. So it reveals itself in the form, but is in a sense invisible in another way, right? So this is kind of the Uranian space that there's an invisible metaphysics that go beyond form. And then there is the form themselves, and these two dimensions of reality exist. So as we kind of, as human beings, we navigate this relationship, this dynamic relationship between form and then the non-form. And Chiron is a sensitivity that allows us to understand the essence of this connection. Okay? And in a sense, that sensitivity plays out as sometimes the connection between these two dimensions can cause a negative or harmful experience. It can be something like we can be injured by that. So an example would be something like if somebody had an unstable emotional state and they were suffering from some form of trauma, internally, we don't experience or see the trauma. What we see is the action and behaviorism that comes out of the dysregulated psychological state that we know tears natural law apart. So for instance, let's like war, for instance, would be in a case of the archetype of Uranus interfacing with the Saturnian world, and we would say something like we can say and point to the disturbance in the psychic field that leads to the devastation from the actions of this displaced emotion. Okay, you say something like somebody was traveling in their car and they took out their mobile phone, they were distracted, and there was this incident and the person lost their life. Like the effect of the interplay between these two states can wound people and have consequences to these experiences. Okay. So are you starting to sort of like grasp the interplay and the dynamicness of Chiron's relationship to the way that these two dimensions of reality, Saturn and Uranus, that when they interplay, they can create and do create aspects of ourselves that can be wounded. And so we can often be sort of bound by that suffering process. While simultaneously, Chiron also points to and is a translator for these two dimensions that offer us the ability to grow beyond structures, to innovate, and then to form new structures in that innovation that then leads us to grow beyond our old forms. And we kind of experience this kind of progressive awakening of consciousness as we grow into a form. That form becomes senescent and outdated. Uranus comes along and says, let's accelerate beyond it. And then we establish new forms in that process. We anchor new identities, new narratives, new myths, new perceptions into that. And then we grow. And that's how this kind of interplay happens. And Chiron allows us the understanding of what Uranian states of frequencies represent and what Saturnian states of frequencies represent. And kind of like the interplay, like Uranus talks its language, Saturn talks its language, and Chiron knows how to communicate between these two states of awareness. Like there's a synthesis process. So it's both an awakening, an educator, and wisdom provider, but it is also a aspect of where our more primal states can cause destruction and suffering. Yeah? Okay. In a sense, it almost reveals our more primal nature. So this is kind of the synthesis in the centaur state of being, where you've got this man body humanness coming out of the animal instincts within ourselves, and the need to have both of these interconnected with each other. You can't have one primary state or or just the Chiron, like the centaur state, the human consciousness out there state, which is the Uranian moment, and you cannot have just the primal state. They must be synthesized together, and that's the dilemma that we are faced here now in the collective, globally, and also for us internally. Okay, individually as well. So this is kind of, I've set this up now. So now we have comprehension of Saturn-Uranus-Chiron dynamics. I've got a little illustration here for us to look at. And so what I want to now do is talk about how this planetary system is showing up in our consciousness at this point in time, and then what it means for us moving forward. So those are the two things that I'm going to try and focus on today, or now. Okay. So as you can see in this diagram, you've got Pluto right at the bottom, Uranus, Neptune beneath the surface, and then you have Saturn, Jupiter, Moon at the top, and all the personal planets. And the imagery, which some of you have already seen before, is a way to understand the Saturnian Uranian dimensions. So cultures, civilizations, cities, countries, etc., on the surface have these Saturnian definitions and laws. I am American, I am European, I am Asian, I am from Australia, etc. And when somebody says I'm American, or when somebody says I am South American, or somebody says I am Australian, there's a part of you that understands the definition at a surface level, like, oh, this is where it is in the world map. And then there's a part of you that understands the metaphysics of what exists beyond that. Like, for instance, in America, there are cultural references and nuances and understandings. Well, are you from, do you come from the east side? Are you from the west side, etc.? If you're Australian, again, same context, right? There is something that exists beyond that. So this is the dimension that we're playing with over here. This is that in reality, there are these two dimensions that we're now bringing into our conscious awareness. And these definitions, Saturnian definitions, are at the light. We can see it. And in our world, we interrelate with it. So we've got a culture or a country or a city's sort of set of rules and principles and definitions and boundaries that it defines. The people define it. And this will be the taboos. This will be what's accepted. This is not what's accepted. What are the cultural belief systems? And then beneath the surface, you have all of the memory that exists based on the time that this culture has existed, right? And so you have traumatic experiences, like, for instance, in America, 9/11, for example, would be a Uranian state of memory field, right? It happened a long time ago, but it carries with it a deep sensitivity. In fact, you could say something like if somebody had lost somebody during 9/11, then they would naturally be coming into that Chiron moment of, yeah, I feel that grief. Or for instance, in Ukraine, as an example, with the current conflict that's taking place there, the current conflict that is happening in the Middle East, the current conflict that is happening in other parts of the world. The point here that I'm trying to make is that we are surrounded at the moment in a world where there is a very strong awareness of deep metaphysical realities that are emerging into our awareness. So the bottom is emerging into the awareness of the top of the citadel. And we as human beings are trying to frame these emergent images and experiences that are emerging, that are coming from that Uranian state into our consciousness. This is what's really happening here. And it's because Uranus is so destabilizing and disorientating and fracturing and breaking apart in order for new things to exist, it turns out that it comes out in a very dysregulated way. And that dysregulation then destabilizes things more, because the more that there is a destabilization, the more there is a need to try and control that. So what we will see with this Chiron North Node conjunction is this dynamic tension between new potentials and new forms and new experiences coming out of Uranus and merging into the collective field, right, on the surface over here. And then this top-down state of consciousness that is trying to orientate its sense of reality, its sense of definitions. And that orientation, that top-down piece, will respond to it by embracing new realities and saying, okay, things need to change, while at the same time struggling with the control and domination of wanting to keep things the same. This is the dilemma between the new and the old. Okay? And so individually, this is happening in our own ecosystem, but that as a collective, we're dealing with this as well. So for each of you, this dynamic tension between the submerged energy that is coming to the surface, and then the way that the surface tries to understand the context of what's coming beneath the surface. And as you can see here, I've put Chiron right between the middle, the actual threshold point between the submerged reality and the conscious reality. Okay? So now, what we are doing here is that, like, and I wrote it down, I'm going to try and see if I can articulate this in this way, is that Chiron on the North Node is pointing towards the way that we can respond to these emergent new forms that are coming out of the subconscious, okay, and are challenging these and are challenging these pre-existing structures and these new forms, these old forms, and it is awakening new dimensions of reality that have not been established before. So, as I said, like, and I probably said this like a few times in the same way, it's just like the energy from Uranus is emerging into the surface. This is Uranus in Taurus. And then Saturn in Pisces from the top down is pointing to a culmination and the realization and the awakening of decayed structures that no longer support humanity moving forward. And it is also showing us what has existed in our subconscious, the kind of unresolved tension and material debris that we have not addressed that is now coming to the surface. So not only is there new patterns of ways of relating to the world coming to the surface, there is also an emergence of where everything has not been addressed that has now been repressed coming to the surface as well. And as I said, Chiron is trying to help us regulate as well as find new pathways for these two dimensions to have a conversation with each other with minimal loss and minimal suffering, which unfortunately there will be. There will be the suffering, and there will also be states of awakening that grow beyond these definitions. Both realities will be present. And this is present for you too. So at an individual level, each of us is needing to address where our own subconscious memory is coming to the surface, where we have lost our sense of agency, where we're stuck in a cycle of suffering, where our own traumas, our own emotional displacements have gripped us, and we're going beyond them, right? I've talked about this in the other videos. Chiron is pointing to that. As I said before, Chiron is like showing us, hey, here's where a new pattern needs to come out of this past pattern that no longer serves you. Oh, and also be mindful of the fact that as you move through this experience, there can be turbulence, and there will be turbulence, right? But show up for it. Try your best to show up for it. Be present with Aries energy, be present with new forms that are coming out. Allow yourself the space to know that these new forms are not grounded, so they're not in a Saturnian state yet. They're still sort of, they're in our instincts, right? I don't know where I'm going with this, but I know that I'm going to show up for it and take up space in this new way and let this new path naturally unfold for me. There's an incredible level of surrender in some way to the acceptance of this place that we're merging into, a deep like scariness as well, that merging into the, like going into the darkness can afford us to freeze and be like, whoa, where are we going? But showing up each day is the medicine here. Okay, showing up each day and saying, I'm ready to anchor in and make a choice that allows me a progression towards a reality that is freeing me from the suffering that I have endured due to experiences that no longer are relevant for me, not only as an individual person, but as a culture and a civilization as well. Now, in terms of culture and civilization, that's more complicated, but it will happen. The locality of your own experience is where the power lies in this conversation, at least. And that means tomorrow or today, I start with the application and showing up with agency, with choice, with I can do this, I can move beyond the state. I want to achieve these things that I want to achieve, and so I'm ready to do that. That's kind of the message that Chiron is suggesting here, but we're at the same time sensitive to where these experiences have kept us back or holded us back or not allowed us to feel, or not allowed, but where there's been a disconnect. We're kind of re-emerging and re-establishing healthier states of action within ourselves to move into something and to lean into an experience that, and a set of experiences and new choices. That's kind of the key here that I'm really trying to put across here. So we're growing into new forms of reality. We're growing beyond previous outdated structures. That's the Sun in Pisces and Saturn in Pisces. The Uranus in Taurus is the piece of new forms, new shapes, new values, new ways of being. And Chiron is pointing to the need to find that there is a new response out of this old form and to awaken new forms to grow beyond that. And when I talk about forms, as I said, it is like choices or actions that you can take in your day that are different from what has been holding you back. So you can have somebody that is in the midst of awakening to their own emotional displacement. You can have somebody that has already done that emotional work, is now at a place where they want to follow their purpose, right? Or have had an experience of awakening that's led them to some form of transformation, that now they're on a path of individuating themselves. And then there's the people in the middle that are in that kind of process of realizing, oh my God, there are these internalized messages and perceptions and patterns of emotions that no longer serve me. And I'm in the midst of trying to heal that within myself, right? That's kind of the range and scope. Where are you in that? You can let me know in the comment section with that, by the way. And this is the final thing that I'll talk about today in terms of this video, is that right now, there are two ways that Chiron and the dilemma that we will face. One of them is that if you can transform beyond the suffering of the experiences that you had and step into a new way of being, there is a self-exploration that will emerge out of this process that will be beyond what you've understood yourself to be. That's the North Node energy. and an individual path will begin to emerge for you. So ask the question, well, what does that look like and how do I get there? That's not something that intellectually is understood. It's like an inner knowing you're following those instincts. And for those of you that know what I'm talking about, you experience it, you see it. Then there's the other side, and this is the more sort of side that's more challenging and worrying, but at the end of the day, this is reality, is that if that state of integration into new forms cannot be transmuted, then there is a regression into the more primal actions and responses, which have a more warlike behaviorism, a more response to aggression, a more it's that the trauma has not been able to be integrated or resolved or work through, and so therefore there is the manifestation of that frequency that is duality. It creates duality. It creates us and them. It creates a separation, and unfortunately, Chiron is pointing that out to us as well. That if we do react from that state of suffering, from that state of woundedness, from that state of displacement, then you will see devastation come out of it. And that is a dilemma that we will continue to keep seeing while Chiron's transiting Aries as well, is the potential to split into like an individuated self-exploration state, and then a realization of the loss of agency and what that means to us as human beings when that agency has been ripped apart. So whenever somebody's crossed your boundaries or that you felt a violation of your own personal space, the natural instinct is to want to reclaim that space or to engage back. Oftentimes, if that trauma is too intense and that impact is too intense, we freeze into that state and we lose that agency, right? And that becomes a sensitivity. This is also what Chiron's talking about. It is the awakening of the repressed agency, the repressed willpower that has been subdued through many, many lifetimes and many, many ancestral karmic patterns of loss of agency because of dominance and control. So we will see this emerge within the collective as well. So individually, you might be working through those colonized parts within yourself. Okay. Check the description for the link to sign up for the Immersion program, the waitlist. We'll be sending information to people there in terms of when the program's going to be releasing. It is one of the best ways to awaken our agency in the cosmos, to come back into understanding the sky as a guidance tool. I will post the video. I'll post the link to the current live stream also there. And I will also post the playlist that is part of this video series, okay? All right, my friends, thanks very much for this. This was a very intense video, I suspect. And I really hope that you're enjoying these videos. And until the next one, have a good day. Bye.